Right, ladies and gents, another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast, and I just wanted to point you to the Nimble Warrior book that, yes, I wrote. Believe it or not, I put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and pumped out a book that is meant to get you moving better, reducing pain, and improving performance through the methods that I used in order to get myself out of bed and walking better again after my back and knee injury. And so I want to spread the word and get that book into your hands. All you have to do is go to thenimble-warrior-book.com, throw in your information, and I will send it to your house, and I'll even sign it for you. And $1 goes to the Wounded Warriors Canada Fund. So if that sounds good to you guys, please head to thenimble-warrior-book.com and get yourself a book. Today, ladies and gents, I am really proud to have John and Adam from Warrior Adventures Canada. They were basically on my radar since around November 11th, so around Remembrance Day, because another fellow podcast guest, Mike George, was starting this collection, this ability to rally up a whole bunch of veteran-run businesses and donate to Warrior Adventures Canada, which is a charitable organization that takes veterans and first responders out on these awesome outdoor adventures. And I just absolutely had to support this cause, because not only do I love being outdoors, but the cause and supporting veterans and getting us back on our feet and getting us active in the community again is so important to me. So I was proud to be a sponsor of that initiative, and was really happy that they were willing to come and sit down on the podcast and have a chat about what they're doing and all the awesome work that they're doing for veterans and first responders. So without further ado, here's John and Adam from Warrior Adventures Canada on the Hard to Kill podcast.
Welcome to the Hard to Kill podcast, the go-to podcast for military, LEO, and EMS professionals, sharing ideas and experiences from around the world to make you hard to kill. Here's your host, Dave Morrow.
Welcome, ladies and gents, to another episode of the Hard to Kill podcast. Today we have John and Adam from Warrior Adventures Canada. They've got an awesome organization going on right now that's taking Canadian Armed Forces vets and first responders out on wilderness adventures. And I had to have them on the show because a mutual friend of ours was really pumped to help them out. And I was honored to be asked to donate some of my profits from the month of November for Remembrance Day. So these guys are hard chargers. And John, Adam, it's a pleasure to have you on. How you guys doing?
Hey, Dave, doing great. Thanks for having us on, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Dave.
Awesome, guys. So let's get right into it, man. What is Warrior Adventures Canada, and how do you get this off the ground?
Yeah, so what we've kind of been doing for years is Adam and I have known each other for over 10 years now. And during our military career, we've kind of always gone on these outdoor adventures in our free time, whether it's rock climbing, canoeing, or just camping out in the wilderness. And during one of these trips, I was reading a book by Sebastien Junger called Tribe. Sure you've heard of it?
Yep, love it.
So in the book, he's talking a lot about hardship and coming together as a tribe versus society in these times, and how it can benefit you. And we started thinking, well, maybe these kind of outdoor trips that we are doing, some of them are kind of tough. Maybe it is helping us, have a work well long term in our job. And is there a way we can bring this to other people? So we started, just chit-chatting, who can we bring along with the trips with us? Is there a way we can open up to more and more people? And then from there, it just kind of grew, like, let's do trips for all vets and first responders in Canada. And that's kind of where it grew from.
Solid. So how many trips have you done so far?
2. We did
Okay.
Des Moines, down the river for about 7 days. And then we went out to the Bugaboos out west, did some alpine stuff. Yeah.
Okay, wicked. So bring us along kind of like the journey. What would a veteran, let's say myself, goes on one of these trips, what can I expect? Being a city boy, although I was in the infantry, my knowledge of living in the woods is pretty limited. So would you be able to take a city boy like myself and show me the ropes and make sure I don't die of exposure when I'm out with you guys?
Yeah, man. So basically the trips have 6 objectives that we're trying to accomplish during these week-long trips. One of them is to teach mental resiliency skills to the participants. And this is going to help them, perform on demand, whether they're releasing from the military and they got a new job interview coming up or something like that. But it's also going to allow them to deal with the stress of the day to day, and not have those roller coaster highs and lows as their day progresses. Another objective is to teach new skills. So whether it's rock climbing or whitewater canoeing or backcountry camping, another objective is to just bring the participants into nature. People, like you said, a city boy, people get kind of disconnected from the real world when they're in their phones, they're in the cities, they're kind of stuck in the office too long. It doesn't really help their mental health at all. So that's another one of our objectives. Fourth objective, is kind of grow that support network, bring people together. Maybe you release from the military, you move back to your hometown, you lost connection from people that you served with. And being in the military and having those big groups is a big part of allowing us to deal with those stresses of the job or life. You have people to lean on, people that are like-minded. So if we can bring a team of them together, they can make some new connections. It just allows them to have another way to deal with stress, deal with things when they come up. A fifth objective is demonstrating healthy lifestyle behaviors. So being active, being social, learning new skills, and just being outside are all things that everyone needs to do to be mentally fit. And the last kind of objective for Warrior Adventures is to, just bring awareness to PTSD and operational stress in the first responder and veteran world, and not just the treatment of it. Let's talk about the prevention. How are we going to train these people? Like a young infantry guy or a young paramedic, get him some experience thinking about these things, thinking about how to train his mind and not just his body. You could do all the push-ups and pull-ups you want, but if you're just training one part of the equation here, it's going to come apart at some point. So we need to be able to train the mind as well as the body.
I'd just like to highlight one point too that John was talking about, is that we are like-minded individuals. So whether you're from the city or the country, we all kind of are from that same cut of cloth, where you come into the group and you're going to recognize right away, first responder, that it's the same type of people that are kind of the sheepdog, that classic saying. So there's no concerns there. You kind of fit right in right away. It's pretty neat.
Yeah. So to answer your question, how are we going to get someone like yourself or anyone really to go through our program and accomplish all those objectives? Well, the first thing we do is we want to kind of build like a team atmosphere. These people are coming from different backgrounds, whether it's corrections, police, fire, military, and they're coming from both coasts. So the first thing in our trips is we kind of get together in a location for a day or 2 days, depending on the situation, and we kind of plan and prep for the trip together. So whether that's learning a few skills, rescue skills, climbing skills, and before we get out there, or packing and preparing our gear. So we're going to pack our gear together, we're going to prep our food together, we're going to go over a rough plan of the trip, and this kind of gives us the ability to gel as a team before we get dropped off in the middle of nowhere. So that's kind of how the trip starts. From there, we get to a location, whether it's in the Rocky Mountains last year or northern Quebec the year before that. The first few days, we're still teaching skills and we're honing those skills. So running rapids, rock climbing, hiking, that kind of thing. And then near the end of the trip, there's going to be some challenges. Okay, we're going to get this team to run this rapid on their own without the guide's help. We're going to get them to climb this pitch with minimal supervision. So it's going to allow them to use their new skills, but also put into practice some of those mental resiliency techniques or performance on demand techniques that we talk about during the trip. Visualization, thinking about what you're going to do, whether it's another thing we like to talk about, what's important now, or WIN, W-I-N, breaking down your objective into chunks, and don't think about every little step along the way. Can this go wrong? Can that go wrong? What's going to happen? What do I have to do right now? What's important now? Is it setting up my canoe properly at the beginning of the rapid? Is it making sure all my climbing equipment is on safely and done my buddy checks? Just take it step by step, and it's going to allow you to accomplish that goal, just like anything in life, one bite at a time. There's an old saying, I'm sure you've heard it, you can eat an elephant one bite at a time. We'll take those things in life one step at a time, and that's how we're going to accomplish it.
That's awesome, man. You touched on a few things that I kind of want to go back to, namely the concept that you're using the term warrior, and I like the way you're using it in the sense that you want to ensure that a warrior isn't just somebody who knows how to shoot a rifle and be physically strong, but to also have that built-in psychological capacity to endure. And that's something that, I created like my warrior training program, but I thought about why I wanted to use the term warrior, because I wanted to ensure that there was this idea that the warrior is kind of like a complete entity. It's not just the fighter. It's not just the guy that can be a hard charger and, storm a trench, whatever you want to call it. It's the individual that can reflect and be pensive and actually be kind of like that warrior philosopher type individual. So what's kind of like the for you guys anyways, what's kind of like the guiding philosophy behind that, or maybe the experiences that made you come to that conclusion?
Yeah. So I think what we've kind of pushed towards is that, everyone has their own religion, their own path in life. And we simply just want to help you along it. We don't have one solid answer. And I know there's a whole whackload of answers out there, which is good because those people can use those and, they benefit from them. But it's not always like that one answer that works for every individual. We just simply want to put them out there in this adventure where they can grow their own path, and we're just there to help them along the way. And they're there to help each other and us along the way. Kind of that, everyone's just in the group and doing their own unique individual stuff, and we build it together. It's what everyone benefits from. And we kind of want to push that kind of warrior spirit, I guess, forward.
Yeah, to add on to that, I would say a lot of people are searching for an easy answer or someone to give them the next steps. Tell me what to do and when. What are the steps to get to where I want to go? But everyone's mission is different. Everyone's way they're going to get there is different. You're not going to come on our program and at the end think to yourself, I know exactly what I'm going to do next. These guys laid it all out for me step by step by step. I know what I'm doing. We can give you some tools. We can give you some insight. You're going to have introspective times. But at the end of the day, it's on you to discover what your next mission is, what your next step is, or how you're going to perform on your next mission. Say you are a young member who's just joined the infantry or just joined the police force. What's going to allow you to have a long career is different. What's going to allow me to have a long career. So as we share our stories together and we share our techniques, we're going to take a little bit from everyone, and you're going to build your little, your own toolbox of what's going to work for you as you go forward, whether it's releasing and going back into the civilian world, or is it starting a long career in the military or first responder world?
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of interesting because the fact that we do this in nature, the river is perfect because it's just going with the flow. You know what I mean? You hit all these different rapids and everything else, and then this calm spot. It's kind of just that way to smoothly go through in a balanced way of life. And, we look at all these different, perfect answers, perfect solutions that are always out there, but it could be any solution. It could be just your own kind of fork in the road that you've chosen to go down and it worked for you. And don't be hesitant to think like that wasn't the right way. It's just one of the ways that you're going, and then go with it. Go with that flow.
The quote that comes to mind right now is "the path is the way," just from what you guys are saying right now. But that takes a tremendous amount of ability to look inside, right? And that's not always easy, especially if you're just starting out. Let's say you're 20, 21, like I joined when I was 19, right? And I guess you can call it wisdom. Like I'm pushing 40, and it took me a while to get to the point where I can actually think and just try to understand like what the hell's going on inside. Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Why am I getting angry, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what you guys are doing is noble, because it's not always evident that, okay, I have to think about why things are the way they are. How am I going to actually set myself up for success? So I think what you guys are doing is pretty awesome. And especially you guys talked about setting up like a challenge-based system within the group. And that's something, being members of, Canadian Armed Forces, you kind of, that's part and parcel of joining. But I can't really speak to police forces and first responders, but from my limited understanding, like that's not part of their training where they have to really band together and work as a team under a challenging situation. They're just presented individual challenging situations, like a call that they have to go to, and then they have to learn how to work together on the spot. So can you guys speak to that? Like, is there something there, especially for first responders, that kind of clicks a little bit more, or is it kind of across the board? You just see, because we come from a stressful kind of high tempo environment, we're all able to just kind of do that.
Yeah, something I saw during our first trip, and this might just be my perception, but the first responders, some of them, once we started sharing stories and then they started chatting, they kind of they were like, okay, there is a larger community here that I wasn't really aware of, and we are sharing a lot of different things. Whereas military guys kind of know that we work in way larger groups than they're used to working. The first responders are. So, like you said, they sometimes aren't aware of how similar our experiences can be and how we can learn from each other. Some of them, for sure, guys at the firehouse or whatever, they have a tight team. But others, corrections people, fire, EMS, they might not have that large group to rely on. And on that trip, I could see in some of them being like, okay, this is something here. These like-minded individuals, we're sharing stories, we're sharing techniques. This is kind of what I've been missing, or this is what I've had and I've lost along the way somewhere.
Yeah, I don't want to disagree, but it's just different. The first responders, take firefighters for example, right? Like you and I in military might think what watching your six is just slightly different in a firefighter context, where they're in a team. They have to meld together, because if they go into that burning building, they got to kind of watch each other if something happens. So it's maybe not watching behind, but just in a different perspective from the side. But definitely similar though.
Yeah, there's also a dynamic in the military where there is many different trades and branches where you can get kind of different divisions. There's a nuance to everything. There's guys and girls in the police force are going to have different experiences than guys in the military, and same with all the other communities. So you kind of take them as they come, and that's why we try to build a diverse group on our trips. We don't want 10 ex-infantry guys or 10 EMS on the trip. We want diverse background of experience, so people can learn from each other. And we also don't want 10 or 12 people on our trip that it's going to be super easy for them. You're not going to learn anything if you're already an expert rock climber and you're super fit. It's not going to be hard enough for you. And we don't want it to be an extreme struggle either. You want that right sweet spot of, okay, you have to learn something and I have to think about applying it. And that's when you're going to get growth, is when it's right in that kind of sweet spot where you're failing and achieving about 50% of the time.
That's awesome.
On that self-awareness that you were talking about, right? You see how other people are self-aware in their own way.
Yeah, right on. Now, when you guys are doing the programs, do you guys notice, and I'm just speaking anecdotally here, just from some of my buddies that are, in law enforcement, do you get a sense that the Canadian Armed Forces is able to provide a lot more support and training on the I guess the mental health side of things compared to, let's say, the police or any of the EMS services? Have you been able to kind of glean that there's a bit of a gap there? And are we, as an organization, are we doing really well compared to others, or are we doing kind of the same? What have you been able to glean anything out of that?
From my experience, it's kind of all over the map. It depends on your immediate leadership, I think, a lot of the time. Depends on where you're serving and when. I haven't spent enough time in this world to give you a good enough answer on that. I really think a big part of it is your immediate leadership, which is another reason why we like to bring people that are kind of newer in these communities on our trips, because the earlier they learn about it and the earlier they're thinking about it, the better they're going to be able to support themselves and their subordinates in the future. So I think that's a big potential win in the future, is if we keep pushing this and people keep talking about it and thinking about it, there would be less issues with it going in the future, because a lot of people, a lot of the struggle that they do have is because of poor leadership, potentially.
Yeah, gotcha. Like, do the people that come on the trip, like, I'm also curious, if you're, let's say, military is one thing. You may be on, you may be on leave, or you may be a veteran, and you just have the ability to go on a trip with you guys. But let's say you're a police officer. How would a police officer, let's say, who's still active, do they have to be retired in order to show up? Because they got to take off a chunk of time in order to go. So is that kind of like a barrier for some of these individuals? Like, oh, I can't take the time off, or is that like a non-issue? Have you been able to find that out at all?
Each organization is a little different on how they do that. Police force, RCMP kind of are coming around, I think, to the idea of doing this as not really taking time off, like going on to leave to go on this. It's kind of like maybe a bit part of the job where, hey, we can kind of send someone out and actually build them up, and then come back even stronger, and push it out. This is all tying into kind of that message that's getting pushed out further, and it's getting there. Manuel, obviously, with PTS in Perth, has done a significant job getting that message out there. Camp Aftermath is another organization, and in just podcasts like yours that help get that message out there. In time, it'll just grow and get better. I think that answers your question.
So yeah, I was kind of getting to the point where this is looking more and more like something that is part of the professional development of anybody in any one of these fields. And in order to have somebody who's effective over the long term, you need to ensure that their mental health is like on point. And, especially a police officer, like I got some buddies that are just, they can't work anymore, and that's a shame, because they always love what they did, but they just can't work anymore. So now you've lost some of your effective strength because there was no program in place to ensure long-term mental health care. So that's what's cool about you guys, that there's something there that you can actually go do. And that's kind of how I see things now for myself. It's like, rather than just go and charge forward at all times without really putting a mental health care plan in place, now my mental health care plan is one of the important plans that, on top of like being physically active, Jocko Willing's term is like going to the mind mechanics. I love that term, man. Like, go for a tune-up. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's the culture that's kind of changing. So do you guys see that at all in your culture, that there's a mental health kind of culture that's starting to take hold? Because obviously you guys are tracking, like you figured it out, and you're doing something, you took action. But is that slowly changing? Because I've been out now for a period of time that I don't really know what the vibe is in the Canadian Armed Forces. But for you guys, like, do you feel that there's a change going?
There is a bit. I'd say we're trying to be proactive in it with this nonprofit. Like, we've just taken on the first trip someone that was quite young, and it was more of a proactive move because he just had seen in his like paramedic world that some of the older guys had these kind of mental struggles and stress. So they just simply were like, I don't want to be like that. So we thought, this is great. Let's throw him on the trip. And I think some of the strategies he kind of left going, hey, this is going to help me huge further on.
Yeah, I like to think of it as mental fitness rather than mental health. When you train your body, train your mind, you don't necessarily have to be either in any of these communities to train your mind, but you need it for sure if you're in this line of work. You go to the gym, you work out, you need to train your mind. It doesn't really necessarily have to be in preparation for any horrible event that's going to happen on the job. It's just going to make you a better person all around. So while you're going to the gym and you're lifting weights and you're doing CrossFit workouts or whatever, you need to be doing something to train your mind, whether it's meditation, reading, learning new skills. You need to challenge both aspects of your body. And the byproduct of that is, yes, you are going to be more resilient to challenges that come up mentally and physically in the job. So I think mental fitness is a big part. And to answer your question, yes, I see it coming up a little bit more in the younger generation in the military for sure. Yes.
Cool. So can I ask you, aside from going out to do some cool shit in the woods, go do some climbing, some canoeing, what are some of your mental fitness strategies at home? And either one of you guys can chime in.
So I like to, like I quickly mentioned it at the beginning here, is Adam will smile when I say this, but my big one is what's important now. So WIN, and you can kind of utilize that in all aspects of your life, whether it's, starting a business, working out, planning and doing stuff on the job. Everything gets done in incremental chunks. You know where you're going, you know the long game, but if you focus on that and you're looking off in the distance or you're not paying attention to what's right in front of you, you're going to miss. So break everything up into little chunks. Focus on what's important now. If something horrible happens, okay, take a moment, let it sink in. It's terrible. What is important now? What am I going to do now to further this next steps? I need to keep moving. Things need to keep happening. What's important now? And keep going.
Personally, for mine, and I think a lot of people that know me would kind of laugh, because I very much just go with the flow of things. To kind of give you an example, really simply, if I were to order something in the window, like a coffee, and they get it wrong, I don't really care. I just say, sure, I'll take that. And it's kind of, it's kind of just the way I roll, I guess. But yeah, it's a bit of like, what can I actually change? What can I actually physically, do? Some of the stuff that I can't do, I can't actually change. Don't worry about it. And it's funny because that's one of the things that you can 100% change. But I just don't even worry about that. Like, it's like, sure, I don't know, I wanted just a regular coffee, and they said no, 2 milk. Okay, sure, we'll go with it.
Assuming you're not lactose intolerant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'd like to add in on what Adam's saying. I've heard him talk about it before, where it makes a lot of sense. You only have so much time in the day, and you have only so much, brain power, will to think about things. You don't want to spend your day thinking about all these menial things that don't make any effect on you. Why is my coffee cold? They gave me the wrong coffee. What's that person wearing? Why am I stuck in traffic again? Why did my boss give me this particular task again? Why is it raining today? If you're ruminating with all these different things every day, all day, it's just going to drive you insane. And it's going to leave you no room to work on things that are important, whether it's your relationships, your family, stuff you need to practice or train for the job, side projects, a new skill. Focus on those things. Don't focus on all the stuff that doesn't really mean anything in your life. And don't let it just rattle around your head. It's just gonna go nowhere, and it's not giving anyone any benefit at all.
The deeper thing of that is just taking the positive from it. So whether it's the way you want it to go or not, just find the positive from it, kind of laugh about it, and then carry on. And I think we all know it's you continuously think positive, and it'll slowly just kind of become that way, and you'll just kind of see more of it as well. You're always kind of pushing that. Yeah.
Daily positive affirmations. They're so game changing, man. The first thing that popped in my head was like, I don't know if you guys are Seinfeld fans, but I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. And that was Kramer and his Serenity Now mantra. And it's like serenity, serenity. Granted, they eventually went bonkers, but just being able to not sweat the small stuff is really important, man. The other thing that comes to mind is the meme. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like, behold my field of fucks, notice it is barren. Like just, you can only give a shit about so many things. And it's funny, I was just in the bookstore, and there's a whole section, like the self-help section. And I don't know if you guys saw the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It's like huge bestseller. There's been so many offshoots to that. And like the whole wall was just like, calm the fuck down. Don't give a shit anymore. And it's now like part of like our culture now to just, there's so much going on. So when somebody gets your coffee order wrong, it's not the end of the world, man. Like, laugh it off or be like, hey kid, like, actually, I didn't want milk in that, but I'm going to take it, but just, watch out next time, whatever, like just bring it down a notch, because so many people are just jacked up. And that speaks to, I think, I can't remember who I was giving this talk, but our brains are wired to find threat and assess and be on the lookout for predators and not dying. But in our society, like, we don't really have many threats anymore. So we're still seeking that out. And then when something rubs us the wrong way or we get stuck in traffic, we now identify that as a major, major threat. And then our entire endocrine system gets fired up. And now we're in that like fight or flight, but we can't really fight anything. We have nothing to do. So now we've put that into like a cup that can only fill up so much. And if every little thing is adding a little bit more water to that cup, that if it overflows, it just causes kind of a meltdown. Well, then you're going to be living awash in all these toxic hormones, and it's just going to make life miserable for you and everybody around you. So have you guys found any, are you using any evidence-based approaches? Because everything you guys are saying just looks like it's like right down the line on exactly what you're supposed to be doing for proper mental health, which is like get outside, get some vitamin D, do some like shared hardship, and just struggle. Because if you're not struggling at something that has a mild bit of danger associated with it, we're going to go down into that toxic feedback loop where everything is just causing stress, and it's not actually that stressful, but you can't cope with it because you don't have that outside coping mechanism. So did you guys do any research on that? Because it just seems like you did. Like, you guys are like tracking really hard.
Yes, we read a lot in the first year leading up to the first trip, and I spent a lot of time writing these crazy long grant proposals to different organizations to ask to support our organization. And I spent hours breaking down all these little sections that are going to be a part of our trip and how they benefit mental health, how they benefit, combating anxiety or depression or whatever it is. And then I started realizing it's almost laughable that I need to explain how it's going to be beneficial. We're taking groups of people out in nature. We're going to learn new things. We're going to be challenging. We're going to be doing physical fitness for a week. And then I have to explain how that's beneficial and how that's better than sitting on the couch and watching Netflix for hours and hours on end. I got to explain that to people. How is that going to help? It's almost laughable to me. That needs to be done. It does, and it has to be done, for the checks and balances side of it. I would just say, if your listeners don't understand how those things are beneficial, I don't citing research papers and books right now isn't going to change their mind. I think most people already kind of realize that. Most things, people know the right answer. They just got to go and do it.
Check.
I think we're in an interesting era though too, because we kind of are still in that realm of growing up before the internet, growing up before being connected, right? So it's interesting that like a lot of these people that are out there are just like, hey, they get back into nature like they did as a kid, and they're like, man, I feel great. Yeah, we knew that beforehand too, but like everyone, and it's still all very new to us. It's very easy to stay connected and kind of stay in that realm, and then lose sight of like the nature side of it, that you're like, oh yeah, I could just get out there and do it.
That reminds me of a story from our first trip. Just kind of getting out there and just experiencing it and being kind of mindful, being in the moment, which is another big aspect that we haven't even touched yet. But we must have been 4 or 5 days into a whitewater canoe trip, out of cell coverage. There's no roads up there. Haven't seen another soul except for the people on our trip. And one of the guys in our crew was a firefighter, Ottawa firefighter for over 2 decades, and he had shared a story where when he was the most sick, he was always on his phone. He had got the news of a close friend being killed in the line of duty through a text message on his phone, and he got in a kind of state where he always had to check his phone constantly, all day, every day, waiting for that next text. who's going to be hurt next, who's going to hurt themselves next, what's going to happen next. And he just couldn't break the habit of, always being on his phone. And he had, like I said, we're 4 or 5 days in, and his paddle partner, one of our guides, Matt, is paddling with him. And, Matt just kind of nonchalantly asked him if he knew what time it was. And he had said, he was telling the story around the campfire at the end of the night. And he said, after years and years of knowing what minute it was of every day, not only did he not know what time it was, he didn't even know what friggin' day it was. And he's telling the story around the campfire, and tears are coming up in his eyes because of how powerful this was to him, because he knew he was constantly tracking his phone, connected to his phone, connected to social media. And now here we are out in the middle of northern Quebec, and he doesn't even know what day of the week it is. So talk about being in the moment and just getting out there and just doing it and just seeing what happens.
That's an awesome story. That's really good.
I've seen it in both our trips where it's like I don't know if it's already been said, but it's like a 2-day effect. It's 2 days after everyone's disconnected. You kind of see this weird thing where everyone's just, I don't know, feeling good. They're not worried about what day it is, what's happening, and they're just they're almost meditating to some degree, and especially out there in the wilderness in a nice small team. It's easy to meditate, but it's it's kind of nice.
Yeah, something similar happened when I was deployed as well. There's a simpleness. Even though you're in a high stress environment, there is still a simpleness that isn't evident here. Like you got to drive, and there's dickheads that like cut you off and like it fires you up, like and when you're in that like moment where you're just like in the middle of nowhere, yeah, sure, you can go check the internet every now and then, but you don't. And there's just a calmness because you only have one thing to really do, and that's your mission, and make sure that you support your guys and everything like that. But there's a calmness that I haven't been able to replicate back home. And although it's hard to kind of put my finger on it, it's kind of hard to even describe it to my wife and people that ask, like, what was that like? It's almost like being in that wilderness, I guess. It's the calmness of, what you have to do. Like when you're in the woods, okay, we're going upriver. That's what I have to do. I don't have to look at my phone. I don't really have to know what day it is. At the end, we're going to eat, we're going to sleep, repeat. And I think that simpleness, man, that must be like super powerful for anybody, especially, guys that are looking at their phones all the time, but just for that disconnection. So how many other, like that's one awesome story. Like you must have a few other stories. Would you be willing to share kind of some really good stories with us?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to wrap around on what you were saying and you asked earlier, in that simpleness though, then we apply a bit of exposure. So a rapid or something like that to heighten everything back up, to get you out there and all of a sudden have all these senses firing off. And then you start to use this mental resilience. You kind of use this group, this same meditation that you were just in, and you attack these new kind of mindsets. And that's what kind of, I think, is kind of that crucial benefit that you would come out of the trip with, is that, oh, okay, I was able to achieve that in-depth exposure that was a bit frightening and a bit everything else, but the way I dealt with it there, I can kind of apply back in, I guess, the normal world, right?
Yeah, what you're kind of touching on there is the dichotomy of being in like a hyper advanced civilization. So yeah, all these technologies are being invented and it's making our life super easy, but you have to think about them all. So you got to pay your bills, you got to do this, you got to Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, my Apple ID, my heating bill, everything. I got to go to work. I got to put gas in my truck. I got to chop wood for the fireplace. Like there's so many things that all make your life easier, but they're things you need to worry about when you're, like you said, on deployment. And I've experienced it as well. Or when you're on a long wilderness trip, there's only so many things you need to worry about. Yeah, when it rains, you're going to get wet. When the mosquitoes come, you're going to get bit. It's going to be hard. You're going to sweat. You're going to get cuts and scrapes. But really, you just have to worry about getting from point A to point B, taking care of whatever the job or the mission is. Making sure you got food, making sure you got water, and making sure everyone's okay. It's pretty simple. You're not going to have any of these awesome Gucci technologies to make it super fancy for you, but it's just so basic and easy that, people tend to just end up coming out happier at the end of it, I find.
Wicked. Have you guys heard of the concept of decision fatigue?
Yes.
Okay. So that's something that when I was teaching high school a few years back, once I came across this, it was really eye-opening because I was like, oh my God. I was like, I make a ridiculous amount of minor, tiny decisions all day. I'm dealing with 14 or 13 to 16-year-olds, and you can't get away from it because you cannot answer a question, but that's a decision. So you only have so much before you just tire out, and you can't make any more good decisions. And I couldn't understand why at the end of the day, like I was just so miserable. I couldn't, like, my wife was like, man, this is not working out. Like, you got to sort your ass out. What's going on? And, 4 hours a day, it was just, asking me, can I go to the bathroom? Can I get this pencil? And it wore on me to the point where I couldn't do the job anymore. But once I started looking at that research, that's where I learned that if you can limit the amount of decisions you make in a day, your brain's a lot healthier. And that's why, very successful people, like President Obama, Zuckerberg, like they all wear the same shit all the time because that's one less decision they have to make. They value every decision they make because every decision they make is important. I was like, oh, that's a huge revelation. So I think that really ties into what you guys are doing. You're just limiting, like, not only you're outside and you're doing hard stuff, but you're also limiting the amount of decisions. And that's just really liberating for your brain, I think.
Yeah. You asked about some more stories from our trips, and I have one that kind of ties into decision fatigue. On our first trip down the Des Moines River, this was the second last day, and up until this point, the weather had been great. Everyone got along awesome. Everyone was learning how to paddle these rapids. There wasn't any big issues at all. We had a couple people go for some swims, but that's all part of the fun. And second last day, and we get to this big rapid, and 98% chance we're going to get through it fine. But there was one spot in the rapid, if someone had got stuck in one of the hydraulics or one of the holes in this rapid, there was no way to get a rescue or safety into that particular spot, just where it was in the river. And it was near the end of the day, and like I said, the trip had been going fine. And the guys, we kind of got together and we're like, okay, some of the participants are, already lining up to go on this next rapid. They're super excited for it. We're gonna let them go down. Chances are it's gonna be fine, but if someone does end up in this one particular spot in the rapid, it could cause an issue, and a big decision. So if we had spent the whole day, making all these small little decisions about every little thing, we're at the end of the day now. We're just gonna say, okay, yeah, just go for it, or we're gonna pause and think clearly and critically about this thing here. Is it going to change the trip dramatically if we go around this rapid? No. Is it going to change the trip dramatically if we do run it and then someone does get stuck and drowns in this rapid? Yes. So, a big bummer for everyone that wanted to run this big rapid, but we decided to go around, and then we had a long, really good, healthy discussion about it at the end of the day around the campfire. And, I didn't really put it together until you just mentioned it, but maybe that's, one of the key factors in making big decisions like that on a trip like that is, saving those decisions for those key moments during a wilderness trip.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Saving up that mental energy for something that, like you said, nothing happens, awesome, but having something happen where somebody, goes down, drowns, now you've got a whole series of other decisions you're going to have to make. So yeah, you're able to have a more level head and make a more rational decision, which is really at the end of the day what we all want to do with everyone in our decisions. So that's solid stuff. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We talked a little bit of philosophy here, research, etc. Let's pick your brains a little bit. John, you mentioned that you read Sebastien Junger's book, Tribe. Awesome book. Love it. War too by Sebastien Junger is one of my favorite books. Have you got other books on the go right now that would be something you'd recommend for somebody to pick up?
Yeah, I read quite a lot. I'm going to throw a few books at you here. I'll try to speak slowly so your listeners can write it down or Google.
We'll get them in the show. We'll get them in the show notes for sure.
Okay, so Tribe, yeah, that's a huge book. It's not a long read, but you know what? A lot of your listeners probably read it. Hits a lot of good key points for sure. Another one is Lost Connections by Yohan. It's about kind of he questions the long-term use of antidepressants, SSRIs, in dealing with depression and anxiety, and he does a lot of research in some other ways that people can kind of deal with those problems. So that's another good one to pick up. I like any book by Sam Harris. I would definitely read Waking Up. That's a good read.
Mm-hmm.
And by Dan Harris, 10% Happier is a good book for people who are thinking about getting into like the mindfulness game, meditation game, but are a little bit skeptic. That's a good book to read. And The Power of Now, Ekhart Tolle. I know it's a little out there, but there's some good takeaways from that book.
Awesome. Hey, that's very similar to what Mike George had to talk about, which actually, you know what, now that I mentioned Mike George, who was on the podcast before,
Yeah.
I didn't mention, and I said I would go over it. So let's touch base on it now. You wrote a really interesting blog post called The Hero Hustle. And you highlighted Mike in that one, and specifically about the entrepreneur journey. Can you kind of just touch base as to, what the inspiration was to talk about entrepreneurship, and just how you mentioned that entrepreneurship and service, even though they seem like two opposite paths, actually have a lot of similarities?
Yeah, you and Mike touched on it on your show there, but Mike came up with an idea of kind of challenging veteran business owners to do a little fundraising campaign over the days leading up to Remembrance Day. So as he kind of presented it to me, I was like, okay, these are the people that are on board. These are the businesses that they're doing. And I thought, I didn't really clue in of how many veterans kind of get out and do start businesses. So I kind of, did some reading on it. I talked to Mike. I talked to a few guys, why they wanted to do that, what started them off, and those answers are in that blog post. But really, I'm not really sure on why that type of life kind of lends itself to being a good entrepreneur. Maybe you can answer it better than I can, or Adam, if you want to jump in. Maybe it's the unknown. Maybe it's the challenge of it. I'm not sure. Or maybe it's because some people in the military just get sick of working for someone else, shitty bosses in the life, and they want to do something else. I don't know. But that's something I've been thinking about, and I don't have an answer to.
Yeah, I think it's a little column A, a little column B.
Yeah.
At least for me, I had to do something that was challenging, but also I have this urge to not be mediocre. And the path I was going down was the path of mediocrity, and it was starting to grind my gears. And I always had this idea of being in the fitness world because that's always where I gravitated. And I said, you know what, now is the time. And yeah, I want to run my own show. I was sick of not really being in a position where I could call the shots. So there's a bit of ego there as well. And I think just belief in our abilities might be one of the strong factors as well, because we have a very strong work ethic. Like, I think it'd be hard pressed to find any other individual that would, there obviously are, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, I think we come to the work environment with a much different mindset, and it's mission based. You touched on that in the blog post, where it's like, we got to get this done. Okay, how do we get it done? Set up your tasks and prioritize and execute. So I think that makes us kind of very adept at setting up businesses, and delegating is really important as well, and we're used to it. So I think it's a lot of factors that come into play. I don't know if Adam you have any input on that whatsoever, but it'd be good if you do.
There's definitely a handful. Kind of thinking big picture stuff. I think in the military, you're part of that little economy, that little kind of society of gears, and you understand it quite well from the whole pyramid, right, from top down. Whereas then you go out into the normal civilian world, you apply that same kind of principle, just expand it out so it's a bigger economy, and you can kind of see where you fit in exactly in that society. So competitively, you kind of have that advantage, right? Because you see these little, like, small little details that you can, oh, this isn't really maybe out there. I can apply this kind of gear, if you were, in the bigger society. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I think that's big picture, kind of the big advantage on it.
Yeah. I think everything that we're talking about here kind of, I mean, it's kind of nebulous, like it's out there, but there's definitely something there.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Like we have a bunch of different skill sets that if we apply them in the entrepreneur field, I think they end up being successful. And like you said, John, I didn't know there was so many veteran run businesses. Like I did the Operation Entrepreneur a few years back. And, there's a handful of us and I'm like, okay, cool. But it doesn't mean everybody starts a business, it just means that you're interested. But yeah, it's definitely something that is cropping up and not something that I was aware of, a decade ago. And even my buddies that, are veterans that have started businesses, it didn't even click that, they're a quote unquote veteran run business. But now that's something that's starting to take hold here in Canada. And I think it's, partly because of Afghanistan and we have a much younger group of veterans that are now in the workforce and they're able to take on new jobs and new ventures. So anyways, Adam, let's go back to you, man. What are you reading right now? What kind of podcasts you got going?
Oh man. I don't know. I'm usually just all out there. Like I look at the philosophy side of things a lot, and like Alan Watts was just something that was constantly ringing my bell. Just that very like straightforward kind of mentality, I guess. There's a couple of others I'm just not remembering the names of right now, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So like I said, we'll drop all this in the show notes. And if you got another like hot book that you want people like to get after, man, just let me know later and we'll drop it in the show notes, man. Cause the idea here is kind of act as like an incubator for as much information as possible. So, so I'm going to throw you guys just a general question to your business and what makes your business successful. So rather than ask you guys individually, what makes you hard to kill? What makes your business hard to kill?
Yeah, I'll answer that question with a story there. After our first trip, we kind of have this network of our warriors, sharing tips and tricks with each other and keeping in contact with each other after the trip. And a company in Toronto reached out to us that wanted to do some pro bono work, creating a commercial for our organization, which is awesome. And this is top notch. These are professional TV organizations, commercial production companies in Toronto. And they wanted to come out and they wanted to do a canoe trip in Algonquin Park to shoot this big video for us that we could put on our website and kind of promote online. But the timeline that was going to work for them didn't work for any of our WAC crew. We were all busy doing, other stuff. Life came up, family, work, you name it. So I kind of reached out to our War Adventures community, and 3 of the participants from our first trip were like, you know what, don't even worry about it, guys. We got this. They organized a trip for these people. They took them out into Algonquin Park. They did a big canoe trip. They put up with all their camera gear, took them out there, did the 50 takes and every little movement that they required for this film, and then it went out perfectly. And we couldn't ask for more of a family, more of a connection than the people taking ownership into this program, not just the people that run it and the guides, but the people that are participants. We kind of come together as one big family, one big community. And it's that aspect of it, I think, is just going to carry it into the future. And Adam, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
No, that's exactly it. It's kind of that warrior spirit, that mental resilience that just keeps building and building, which I don't know if you can kill that.
No, agreed.
It's a very live and well beast right now, man. I'm loving it, man. It's so cool just to see that this is taking off, and obviously from stories that you just mentioned that clearly you're resonating with the community out there. So guys, it's been awesome having you on. How does somebody get a hold of you, and how do we get signed up for one of your trips?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at War Adventures Canada. And on our website, waradventures.ca, you can sign up for our mailing list. Our next adventure is going to be announced shortly. I'm not going to give you a date right now, Dave. You're going to have to wait and hang out. But when it does come up, we'll shoot it out on Facebook, Instagram, and our mailing list for sure. And then from there, people apply, and that's that. We'll go from there. I don't want to give away too much.
Nice. The suspense is killing me, guys. I really appreciate that. It's gonna keep the listeners just wrapped for freaking more info later on. I love it. You guys are pure businessmen. Awesome job. Okay, guys. So we're all busy dudes. We got a lot on the go. So it's been a pleasure having you guys on. I really hope that we can touch base again on the podcast later once you get closer and closer to that day, and we can do some promo stuff and get the word out even more to more and more veterans, more and more first responders. So I wish you guys all the best, continued success, and best of luck to you guys.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
Cheers, man.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find out more about training, nutrition, and mindset at davemorrow.net. Be sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram at Dave Morrow PT. And don't forget, strong people are hard to kill.